The moment I saw her face through the window of that cabin, I knew my daughter wanted me dead. My name is Harold, and I am 67 years old. But let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand how a man who spent 42 years building a life could watch it crumble in a single weekend. I was born and raised in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Worked the paper mills for 3 decades before I started my own logging equipment supply business. Nothing fancy, but honest work. By the time I retired at 62, I had saved enough to live comfortably. A house paid off in full, investments that brought in steady dividends, and a lakeside cabin up near Kenora that my late wife Catherine and I had dreamed about since we were newlyweds. Catherine passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Took her in 8 months. After she was gone, I threw myself into being the best grandfather I could be. My daughter Rebecca and her husband Derek had given me 2 beautiful grandchildren, Ethan, who was 12, and little Sophie, who was 7. Those kids became my reason to keep going. I thought Rebecca and I were close. She called me every Sunday. She invited me for holiday dinners. When Derek lost his job at the auto plant in Oshawa 2 years ago, I helped them out, paid their mortgage for 6 months, covered the kids' hockey and dance lessons. I never asked for a penny back. That is what family does, I told myself. Derek eventually found work again, something in insurance sales, but things never seemed to get better for them financially. There was always a new crisis. The car needed repairs. The furnace broke down. Ethan needed braces. I helped when I could. I wanted to. It was last September when Rebecca called me with what she said was a wonderful surprise. "Dad," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Derek and I have been talking, and we want to do something special for you. You have done so much for us, and you never take time for yourself. We booked you a week at a fishing lodge up in northern Manitoba. Fly-in only. Pristine wilderness. You always talked about wanting to do something like that." I was touched, genuinely touched. I had mentioned once, maybe twice, that I wanted to experience one of those remote fly-in lodges before I got too old to enjoy it. The fact that she remembered, that she and Derek had planned this for me, it meant more than I could express. "When do I leave?" I asked. "Next Friday," she said. "We already handled everything, the flights, the lodge, all of it. All you need to do is pack your fishing gear and show up at the airport." I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered how they could afford something like that when they were always struggling with bills. But I was so happy, so grateful, that I pushed those thoughts aside. The Thursday before my trip, I drove down to Oshawa to have dinner with them and say goodbye to the grandchildren. It was a lovely evening. Derek grilled steaks. The kids showed me their school projects. Rebecca hugged me tight when I left and told me she loved me. I drove home that night feeling like the luckiest man in the world, but I forgot my reading glasses at their house. I realized it when I got home and started packing. I could not spend a week at a fishing lodge without my glasses. So I drove back the next morning, early, figuring I would grab them and still make my afternoon flight from Toronto. I still had a key to their house from when I used to watch the kids. Old habit. I let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake anyone if they were still sleeping. That is when I heard them talking in the kitchen. I froze in the hallway, just outside the door. Something in Derek's voice made me stop. He sounded excited, eager, in a way that felt wrong. Once the insurance pays out, he was saying, we can finally get out from under all this debt, pay off the credit cards, maybe even move somewhere nicer, start fresh. Rebecca's voice was calmer. We just need to make sure everything looks natural. A man his age, alone in the wilderness. Heart attack, accidental drowning. Nobody is going to question it. My blood turned to ice. He trusts us completely, Derek said. He will take whatever medication you give him without a second thought. And the lodge owner is in on it. Old friend of mine from way back. He knows what to do. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. My heart pounded so hard I was certain they could hear it. What about the kids? Rebecca asked. They do not need to know anything, Derek replied. As far as they are concerned, Grandpa had an accident. Tragic, but these things happen. And we will be there to comfort them with the money he left behind. Rebecca laughed, a sound I had heard 1,000 times. but now it sounded hollow, cruel. 300,000 in life insurance, she said. Plus the house, the cabin, his investments. We will finally be able to breathe. I stood there, frozen, as my entire world collapsed around me. My daughter, my only child, the baby I held in my arms the day she was born. The little girl who used to climb into my lap and beg me to read her stories. She was planning to kill me, for money. I do not know how long I stood there. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. But eventually, my survival instincts kicked in. I backed away from the door, silent as a ghost. I slipped out the front door without making a sound. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking, tears streaming down my face. Part of me wanted to burst back in there and confront them, demand to know how they could do this, how my own flesh and blood could betray me so completely. But another part of me, the part that had survived 4 decades of hard work and loss and grief, that part knew better. If I confronted them now, what would happen? They would deny everything, claim I misheard. And then what? They would know I was onto them. They would find another way. No. I needed to be smart about this. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. I drove home in a daze. My mind raced through the possibilities. Go to the police? With what? A conversation I overheard? They would laugh me out of the station, my word against theirs. And Derek was a charming man when he wanted to be. He could convince anyone of anything. I needed proof. And I needed help. I thought about who I could trust. My brother Frank had passed years ago. My few close friends were scattered across the country. And I could not involve the grandchildren. They were innocent in all of this. Then I remembered someone. A man named Arthur Blackwood. We had worked together at the paper mill decades ago, before I started my business. Arthur had gone into private investigation after he retired. He specialized in fraud cases, insurance scams, that sort of thing. We had not spoken in years, but I still had his number. I called him that afternoon. "Harold," he said, his voice warm with surprise. "It has been too long, old friend. How have you been?" "Arthur," I said, my voice cracking, "I need your help, and I need you to believe me, even if what I am about to tell you sounds insane." I told him everything. The trip, the conversation I overheard, my daughter and her husband plotting to kill me for my insurance money. There was a long silence on the other end. "Harold," he said finally, "I believe you, and I am going to help you, but you need to understand something. If we are going to take these people down, we need to be careful. We need evidence that will hold up, and we need to make sure you stay safe in the meantime." "What do you suggest?" I asked. "Go on the trip," he said. I thought I misheard him. "You want me to walk into a trap?" "I want you to walk into a trap that you control," he said. "Think about it. If you cancel now, they will know something is wrong. They will cover their tracks. They will find another way to get to you, and next time, you might not see it coming. But if you go, if you let them think their plan is working, we can catch them in the act." "And the lodge owner?" I asked. "Derek said he is involved." "Then we need to be prepared for that too," Arthur said. "I have contacts up north, people I trust. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, you go home and act normal. Do not let them suspect anything." It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I called Rebecca that evening and told her I was excited about the trip. I thanked her again for the thoughtful gift. I told her I loved her, and I wondered if she could hear the lie in my voice the way I now heard the lies in hers. Arthur called me back the next day with a plan. "The lodge is called Northern Solitude," he said, "run by a man named Victor Pruitt. I did some digging. Pruitt has a history, petty crimes in his 20s, fraud allegations that never stuck. He and Derek worked together at a camp up near Flin Flon about 15 years ago. They have stayed in touch." "So Derek was telling the truth," I said. "The lodge owner is part of this." "It gets worse," Arthur said. "Northern Solitude is about as remote as it gets. No cell service, no roads in or out. Only way there is, by float plane. If something happened to you out there, it would be days before anyone knew. And with Pruitt controlling the narrative, he could make it look like anything he wanted." My stomach churned. "How do we handle this?" "I am sending someone with you," Arthur said. His name is James Okonkwo, retired RCMP, one of the best investigators I ever worked with. He will be on that plane with you, posing as just another guest. He will have your back. Can we trust him? I asked. With your life, Arthur said. And that is exactly what you might be doing. The day of my departure arrived. I drove to the regional airport in Sioux Lookout, where a small float plane would take me and a few other guests to Northern Solitude Lodge. There were 4 of us waiting at the dock. A young couple from Winnipeg on their honeymoon, a quiet man in his 50s with gray at his temples and calm, watchful eyes, and me. The quiet man approached me as we waited for the pilot. "Beautiful day for flying," he said. His voice was deep and steady. "I am James, heading up for some fishing and peace and quiet." "Harold," I said, shaking his hand. "Same here." He gave me a slight nod, almost imperceptible. But I understood. This was my ally. This was the man Arthur had sent to help me. The flight took about 90 minutes. We soared over endless boreal forest, countless lakes glittering in the sunlight. Under different circumstances, I would have found it breathtaking. Instead, I spent the entire flight wondering if I would live to see the return journey. Northern Solitude Lodge was exactly what you would expect from the name. A cluster of rustic cabins on a remote lake, surrounded by nothing but wilderness for 100 kilometers in every direction. The main lodge had a dining hall, a small bar, and a sitting area with a stone fireplace. There was no internet, no phone, just radio communication with the outside world. Victor Pruitt was there to greet us when the plane landed. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, and weathered by years in the bush. He smiled warmly as he shook my hand, but something in his eyes made my skin crawl. "You must be Harold," he said. "Your son-in-law, Derek, told me all about you. Said you deserved a trip of a lifetime. I intend to make sure you get exactly that." "I bet you do," I thought. But I smiled and thanked him for his hospitality. That first evening, I kept to myself, watched, listened. James did the same. Though we were careful not to seem too familiar with each other, I noticed things. The way Pruitt watched me a little too closely. The way one of the guides, a younger man named Terry, kept glancing my way and then looking quickly at Pruitt. The way my cabin was set apart from the others, at the end of a trail that led deeper into the woods. That night, James knocked softly on my door after the rest of the lodge had gone quiet. "We need to talk," he said. I let him in. He moved with the efficiency of a man who had spent decades in dangerous situations. "I did a sweep of your cabin," he said quietly. "Found this hidden under the floorboards near your bed." He held up a small plastic bag containing several white pills. "Do you recognize these?" I shook my head. "Digoxin," he said. "A heart medication. In high doses, it can cause a fatal cardiac arrest. Nearly impossible to detect in an autopsy if you do not know what you are looking for." My throat tightened. They really were going to kill me. "There is more," James said. "Pruitt has been making radio calls every evening around 9. I managed to listen in tonight. He was talking to someone about timing and location. He mentioned a fishing spot about 5 kilometers from here. Said it would happen tomorrow." I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. Tomorrow. They were going to try to kill me tomorrow. How do we stop this? James sat across from me. We gather evidence. We record everything we can. I have equipment with me that Arthur provided, and we make sure you are never alone with Pruitt or any of his people. "And then what?" I asked. "And then we get you out of here alive," he said, "and we make sure everyone involved faces justice." The next morning, I was scheduled for a guided fishing trip. Just me and Terry, the young guide who had been watching me so nervously. I declined. I told Pruitt my back was bothering me from the flight. Said I would rather rest for a day and start fishing tomorrow. Pruitt did not like that. I could see it in his eyes. But he smiled and said, of course, whatever made me comfortable. James made a show of offering to go in my place. He said he was eager to try out the famous northern pike fishing he had heard so much about. Pruitt hesitated. Something passed across his face. Calculation. Then he agreed. They left after breakfast. James, Terry, and another guide named Mark. I watched them motor across the lake until they disappeared around a point of land. Then I started searching. Arthur had told me what to look for: financial records, communications, anything that could tie Pruitt to Derek and Rebecca's plan. I had perhaps 6 hours while the fishing party was out. I intended to use every minute. Pruitt's office was in the back of the main lodge. Locked, of course, but I had learned a few things over the years. A credit card and some patience got me through the door. Inside, I found exactly what I needed: a folder full of emails, printed out and filed, correspondence between Pruitt and Derek going back months. They had planned everything: the timing of my visit, the medication they would slip into my food, the fishing trip where I would conveniently suffer a heart attack and fall into the lake, the story they would tell the authorities. There was more. Bank statements showing payments from Derek to Pruitt. $10,000 deposited in March, another $15,000 in July, and a promise of $50,000 more once the life insurance paid out. I photographed everything with the small camera James had given me. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to be thorough. Then I heard footsteps in the hall. I froze. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. "Victor," a voice called. It was the cook, a woman named Brenda. "Victor, are you in there? I need to talk to you about dinner provisions." The doorknob rattled. I looked around frantically. There was a window behind the desk, small, but big enough for me to squeeze through. I did not think. I just moved. I was out the window and crouched behind the lodge when Brenda opened the office door. I heard her mutter something about Pruitt never being where you needed him. Then the door closed again. I slipped back to my cabin and hid the camera under a loose board in the floor. Then I sat on the porch and pretended to read a book, my heart pounding like a drum. The fishing party returned that evening. James caught my eye as he walked past my cabin, a slight nod. Everything was going according to plan. But that night, things got dangerous. I was in the dining hall, picking at my dinner, when Pruitt sat down across from me. "Harold," he said, his voice friendly but his eyes sharp. "I was thinking, tomorrow we should get you out on the water. There is a spot about 5 kilometers north of here. Best fishing in the province. I would take you myself." I kept my face neutral. "That sounds wonderful, Victor, but I'm still feeling a bit off. Maybe the day after?" Pruitt's smile did not reach his eyes. "The weather is supposed to turn. Tomorrow might be our only chance." "I will think about it," I said. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded and walked away. That night, James came to my cabin again. "He is getting suspicious," James said. "We need to move faster than I planned. What do you suggest? Tomorrow morning, I am going to radio for the float plane to come back early. Emergency pickup. I will tell Pruitt that I got a message from my family. Something urgent. We will both be on that plane when it arrives. And the evidence? I have already transmitted the key photos to Arthur via encrypted burst transmission. The equipment I brought can piggyback on Pruitt's radio frequencies. Arthur has everything he needs to go to the police. By the time we land in Sioux Lookout, there will be officers waiting to take statements." I nodded. "Then let us hope tomorrow goes smoothly." It did not. I woke to shouting. I looked out my window and saw Pruitt arguing with James near the dock. "Your radio call was intercepted," Pruitt was yelling. "You think I am stupid? You think I do not monitor my own frequencies?" James stood his ground. "I do not know what you are talking about." Pruitt pulled a handgun from his jacket. I did not think. I burst out of my cabin and ran toward them. "Stop!" I shouted. Pruitt spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You," he spat. "You were supposed to be easy. An old man alone in the wilderness, a heart attack nobody would question. But you had to bring help. You had to make this complicated." He raised the gun toward me. James moved faster than I would have thought possible for a man his age. He tackled Pruitt from the side. The gun went off, the shot echoing across the lake. I felt something hot graze my arm, but I did not stop moving. The young couple from Winnipeg had heard the commotion. They came running out of their cabin, confused and frightened. The wife screamed when she saw the gun. Pruitt and James were struggling on the ground. Pruitt was bigger, but James had training and desperation on his side. He managed to knock the gun away. I grabbed it. My hands were shaking, but I kept it pointed at Pruitt. "It is over," I said. "Whatever Derek paid you, it is not worth this." Pruitt stopped struggling. He looked up at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you have done, old man." "I know exactly what I have done," I said. "I have survived." The float plane arrived 3 hours later. Arthur had contacted the RCMP after receiving the transmitted evidence, and they had scrambled a plane with officers on board. Pruitt was arrested on the spot. So was Terry, who had been in on the plan from the beginning. Mark, the other guide, turned out to be innocent, just a seasonal worker who had no idea what his boss was up to. The bullet had grazed my upper arm, painful, but not serious. The paramedic on the plane bandaged it up and said I was lucky. Lucky, I thought. Was that what this was? The flight back to Sioux Lookout felt like an eternity and an instant, all at once. I stared out the window at the endless wilderness below, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. When we landed, there were more RCMP officers waiting. And Arthur was there too, looking older than I remembered, but with the same sharp eyes. "You did good, Harold," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You did real good." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build the case," he said. "Pruitt is talking, trying to cut a deal. He is giving up everything about Derek and Rebecca's involvement." I nodded slowly. "My daughter, my own daughter. I know this is hard," Arthur said quietly. "Harder than anything you have ever faced. But you did the right thing. You saved your own life, and you are going to make sure they face consequences for what they tried to do." I wanted to ask about the grandchildren, about Ethan and Sophie, who had no idea that their parents had tried to have their grandfather murdered, but I could not find the words. Not yet. The next few weeks were a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. Derek and Rebecca were arrested at their home in Oshawa. The evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the bank transfers, the testimony from Pruitt, who was eager to share blame. I did not see them in person, could not bring myself to, but I watched the news coverage, saw my daughter's face as she was led into the courthouse in handcuffs. She looked older than I remembered, harder, or maybe that was always who she was, and I just refused to see it. Derek tried to claim it was all his idea, that he had manipulated Rebecca into going along with it. But the emails told a different story. She had been an equal partner in planning my death. In some messages, she was the one pushing for faster action, the one worried they would not get the money in time to avoid bankruptcy. The trial was 6 months later, I testified. Told the court everything I had heard that morning in their kitchen, everything I had discovered at the lodge, everything Pruitt and Terry had planned to do to me. Derek got 20 years, Rebecca got 15, Pruitt got 12, Terry got 8. Justice, that is what everyone called it. Justice served. But it did not feel like justice to me. It felt like loss, like grief, like the death of something that could never be brought back. After the trial, I went home to Thunder Bay. I sat in my empty house and wondered what came next. The grandchildren were in foster care. Derek's parents wanted nothing to do with them, and Rebecca's were too elderly to take them in. I petitioned the court for custody. It took months of hearings and home visits and psychological evaluations. But in the end, they let me have them. Ethan was 13 by then. Sophie was 8. They were confused and angry and heartbroken. They knew their parents were in prison, but they did not fully understand why. How do you explain to children that their mother and father tried to kill their grandfather for money? You do not. Not all at once. You give them pieces of the truth as they can handle it. You answer their questions honestly but gently. You let them grieve and rage and cry, and you love them through all of it. It has been 2 years now. We live in my house in Thunder Bay. Ethan plays hockey on the weekends. Sophie takes dance lessons. We have dinner together every night. We go to the cabin on Kenora Lake in the summers. James and I have stayed friends. He comes up to visit a few times a year, brings his wife, a lovely woman named Beatrice. We fish together. We talk about everything and nothing. We never mention what happened at Northern Solitude, but it is always there, underneath. A bond forged in something terrible. Arthur passed away last year. Heart attack, the real kind. He was 78. I spoke at his funeral, told everyone that he saved my life, even though I never told them how. Sometimes the grandchildren ask about their parents. When can we see them? Do they miss us? Do they still love us? I tell them the truth. I do not know. I do not know what your mother and father feel anymore. But I know that I love you. I know that you are safe here with me. And I know that whatever happens, we are family. That is the thing about family, I have learned. It is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it is the stranger who sits next to you on a float plane and says, "Beautiful day for flying." Sometimes it is the old friend who picks up the phone and says, "Tell me everything." Sometimes it is the two children who lost their parents but gained a grandfather who will never, ever give up on them. I am 69 years old now. My arm still aches when the weather changes. I have nightmares sometimes, about the gunshot, about my daughter's voice planning my death, about the pills hidden under my floorboards. But I am alive. I am here. And I have learned something that took me almost 70 years to understand. You are never too old to fight for your own life. You are never too old to find new family in unexpected places. And you are never too broken to build something new from the pieces. That is my story. That is how my daughter tried to kill me for $300,000. And that is how I survived. If you are listening to this, and something I said resonates with you, I want you to know one thing. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never, ever be afraid to ask for help. I did not think I would survive that fishing trip. I thought I was walking to my death. But here I am, 2 years later, cooking breakfast for my grandchildren, planning another summer at the lake, living a life I never expected to have. Sometimes the darkest moments lead you to the brightest places. And sometimes the family that tries to destroy you is replaced by a family that saves you. Thank you for listening. My name is Harold, and I am still here.